Today's webinar should run for about 15 minutes, and we're going to be looking at tips for composing your photos, using light in your photos, photographing people, and photographing landscapes and other types of photography. So let's get started. Firstly, we'll take a look at tips for composing your photograph. Compositions is possibly the most important aspect of your photograph. The composition refers to how the image is set up. So what is in the photograph, what isn't in it, whether your photo has been taken up close or far away, and much, much more. So how can we compose a great photo? Well, here are some best practice tips that will help you with composition. So the first tip is use the horizon line to keep your photograph straight. When a photo is level with the horizon line, it creates a sense of balance, and balance is great in photography as it creates stability for the viewer. You can see here an example of a balanced horizon line on the left and an unbalanced version on the right. The second tip is to fill the frame with necessary content. The frame refers to what you see inside the photo. It's up to you what you fill the frame with, but it's best practice to exclude any unnecessary content. In the example here, the focus is on the main figure, but in the example on the right, there's a distracting arm in the way. So simply moving the frame of the photo can crop this out, and we are left with only the important elements. You can also crop things out by zooming in or out while you're taking the photo. The next tip is to use symmetry to improve balance. So we talked about creating balance by keeping your horizon line straight, and we can create even more balance by using symmetry with our photos. Placing your subject matter right in the center of your frame is the most simple and easiest way to create symmetrical balance. So here are two examples of symmetry in photography. When photographing landscapes and buildings, shooting your subject from face on is a surefire way of creating symmetry. Another tip is to use the rule of thirds. So every good photographer will be aware of the rule of thirds. As the name suggests, it begins with dividing the frame into 9 equal rectangles, 3 across and 3 down. You can use your imagination to divide your frame. Also, some or many camera manufacturers will give you the ability to turn on a virtual grid, as will your iPhone and other phone cameras. Now that you've got your equally divided rectangles, the rule of thirds suggests that you place the important element of the scene along one of the lines or where the lines intersect. So as you can see here, the lighthouse runs right along the intersecting line, and my horizon line has been aligned with another intersecting line. So the result is a well-balanced photo. The rule of thirds is one of our most complex tips. So if it sounds like it's too much work, you might like our next tip, which is keep it simple. As we've said in some of our previous design webinars, less is more. Keeping your photos simple can be a safe way of making sure that they turn out great. Think about simplifying the subject matter and how you can capture the photo with the least amount of distractions. In the example here, the photo on the right is too busy. The people are standing in front of a large mural and it becomes very distracting. In the other example on the left, all of the people are spread out evenly with a neutral background, and we can see each person clearly. Okay, so now let's have a look at using light in your photos. So light is very important in photography. Before we had digital cameras and phone cameras, you would have to manually adjust your light settings to get a good photo. If there's too much light, then your photo becomes overexposed with lots of stark white areas. And if you don't have enough light, it results in underexposed photos, making it difficult to see the subject matter as it's too dark. All right, so how can we use light to our advantage? Let's take a look at some handy tips. Firstly, be aware of the sun when you're outdoors. When shooting outside, it's important to consider where the sun is. There's no right or wrong when shooting with the sun, but sometimes it helps to adjust the direction in which you are taking your photo. If someone's facing towards the sun, they may have difficulty seeing and they're going to squint or close their eyes. If someone's facing away from the sun, then it can create highlights from behind or potentially cast shadows across the face. So it's a good idea to take a few photos from different angles, different directions to make sure you get the best result. The next tip is to use natural light to your advantage. This is a handy when shooting indoors. It's to use the natural light available. So light coming from windows is the best way to achieve this. Move your subject matter towards the window and you're more likely to capture a well-lit photo. If you're far away from the window, you're more likely to capture shadows and dark tones. Also, in my view, if you have a choice between photographing a person inside or outside, I would usually go for outside if it's during the day and good light, because you'll get a much better photo, much brighter photo. Next tip is to only use the flash when there is low light. Cameras have come a long way recently, so you're most likely using an up-to-date camera that has inbuilt flash sensor technology. Even in relatively low light, digital cameras can take a decent photo, so you'll only ever need to turn the flash on when it's really dark. Using the flash when there is sufficient light can actually create a bad result, like in the example shown here. You can see there's a lot of reflection on the frame and the person is actually quite dark. So you can remove the guesswork from this by adjusting your camera settings to auto flash. That way your camera will decide when it is appropriate to use the flash or not. One of my favorites is the golden hour. In photography, the golden hour is a period of daytime shortly after sunrise or shortly before sunset. It's during this time that the daylight is redder and softer than when the sun is higher in the sky. The golden hour is a photographer's best friend. So when the sun is at a low angle, it provides photographers with a magical quality of light that makes their photos pop. It's a great time to pull out your camera if you get the opportunity. Here you can see some really good examples of photos taken during the golden hour. And the next one, which is my husband's favorite, is the blue hour. The blue hour is the period just before the golden hour at sunrise and just after the golden hour at sunset. This is the time when the sky has a deep blue hue and saturated colours. It's also a time when streetlights are turned on and buildings and monuments are lit up. Many photographers find this a fantastic time to take photos, including my husband. And this slideshow shows some of the photos he took in Paris and Venice during the blue hour. I did notice that every time when we were traveling, it was time to put the kids to bed, he happened to say, I need to go out and take some photos. So that was very fun. Alrighty, now let's take a look at photographing people. So this is quite different from photographing still life. And here are some tips for photographing people. The first tip is take lots of photos. Oops, sorry. People are constantly moving, whether they're looking around, blinking, or talking. So the more photos you take, the better. This will give you a range of photos to choose from, and you can pick out the best one where everyone is smiling and looking at the camera. You won't have to worry about wasting storage because you can go back and delete any photos you don't want later. Next, declutter your background. So we had this slide before. A portrait will always be more memorable when the subject stands out from the background. So if you can, ask people to move away from a cluttered background or find a neutral wall to stand in front of. The third tip is to be careful where you crop your photo. Where a person's body is cropped can sometimes have a negative effect. It's a general rule of thumb to never crop a person at the neckline. This can make them look like a floating head, as you can see on the left. It's better to include a little bit of their shoulders in the photo as the one on the bottom left. It's also best practice to include the majority of a person's arm inside the photo. So if you want to have more of their body, Cropping it midway through the arm can result in looking like they've got short arms. It's better to include their whole arm, as you can see in the bottom right. These are just suggestions, but whatever looks best to you when taking the photo is probably the right choice. Okay, that's the end of our slideshow for today. So if you have any questions, please send them through to me now while I do a quick recap. So just some photography basics we've talked about. So be sure to fill the frame only with necessary content. Try and keep it simple and don't include stuff you don't need. Don't be afraid to try different things. That's the best way to learn. When in doubt, keep it simple. Use light to your advantage. So remember about the golden hour and the blue hour, which are fantastic times to get out there and take photos. And finally, take lots of photos. You can delete them later if you don't need them, but that's the best way to learn. Now that we're all out of lockdown, except Adelaide, get out there. It's if you're taking a short trip somewhere down the coast or anywhere, get out your camera, take heaps of photos, and maybe just make a small book, and you can see what you think and how your photography is working for you. Okay, let's have a look to see if we've got any questions. So just bear with me for one moment. So far, no questions, so it sounds like everything makes sense. Look, I'm not a professional photographer myself, and you know, I usually just go with what I see. Often your instinct is the best thing. Just don't rush to take your photo. Put your use your the eyepiece to really think about what is in your photo and think, okay, do I need that? Do I need that? Do I want to focus on this person, or am I focusing on the whole picture with the background as well? Things like that. And just looking at the light in your photo. As I said, the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. All right, so no takers for questions by the looks of things, which means I will wrap up. Just my usual speech at the end of the webinar, which is to remind you that you are welcome to call our customer service team if you need any assistance. We are here Monday to Friday, Melbourne time, from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. now, so we are staying late during the pre-Christmas period. We're also here Saturdays at least till 12, but often later than that, so feel free to call then too. Our phone number is 1300 553 448. You can also reach us by email at service@albumworks.com.au, or you can talk to us via live chat.